year, Science Magazine's editors and news staff select a breakthrough of the year, a novel finding that makes headway in solving a long-standing problem and is of interest to a wide array of people. In this video, a few of our news writers provide a brief glimpse of both the 2011 breakthrough and the 9 runners-up.
This last year marks a turning point in HIV prevention. AIDS surfaced 31 years ago. And in the intervening years, there have been very few prevention efforts that use a biomedical intervention that have proven themselves to work. So we've relied on things like condoms and behavior change, and we know the limitations of those. Now it's been shown, if you treat somebody with antiretroviral drugs, you lower their risk of transmitting to someone by 96%. Combining that with other biomedical prevention interventions that have proven themselves, as well as the behavioral and condoms, has led to a concept now that we can actually end the epidemic in locales, if not the entire world in time. This is not a vaccine. A vaccine would be, there's a great desire to have something that you give somebody 3 times and they're protected for life. This requires treatment for decades on end. It's complicated, it's costly, but it's something that the world can do tomorrow. And that has changed the level of hope in a way that's profound.
For decades, astronomers have been confused about where the most common types of meteorites that fall to Earth come from. They come from the asteroid belt, but when they looked out into the asteroid belt, the most common asteroids they saw didn't look like the meteorites they had in their hands. In 2011, Japanese scientists were able to analyze tiny bits of the asteroid Itokawa that the Hayabusa spacecraft had returned to Earth. And with a close look, they could see that the asteroid has the same chemical and mineralogical composition as the most common meteorites found on Earth. So that told them that the distinctive reddened color of the asteroids was just an overlay. It had been fooling them, but it wasn't easy. The return of the Hayabusa spacecraft was complicated by mechanical failures, need to fall back on one backup after another. But this year, the decades-old conundrum of where the most common meteorites come from has been resolved.
Last year, a flurry of new studies came out that showed as modern humans, the first members of Homo sapiens, came out of Africa sometime in the last 100,000 years, they encountered archaic people in more than one place and interbred with them. And so a whole group of new studies came out that tried to find who still carries the DNA from these encounters of the prehistoric kind. They found DNA in Europeans and Asians that showed that they interbred, the modern humans interbred with Neanderthals, but they also found that Melanesians, Australian Aborigines, and Negritos in the Philippines carried DNA from a new kind of human that was discovered in Siberia that lived more than 30,000 years ago. So it's very interesting. We carry a small amount of DNA, between, say, 2 and 10% of our DNA from archaic people that we interbred with on at least 3 different continents. This is significant because it's changing our models of modern human origins. It turns out that as Homo sapiens came out of Africa, they didn't completely replace the archaic people. We still carry some of their DNA in our veins.
This year, researchers in Japan gave us our first full-scale atomic look at a protein complex called photosystem II. So photosystem II is the protein that plants use to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. And chemists would very much like to do the same thing to generate molecular hydrogen that can be used as an alternative fuel that wouldn't have any CO2 or other carbon compounds that would be greenhouse gases. And so what's amazing about the catalyst that is at the core of photosystem II is it is virtually unchanged by billions of years of evolution, which tells us that it is exquisitely tuned to doing its job. And chemists are now trying to learn those exact same lessons to be able to use those insights for alternative energy. So a better understanding of how plants do this, which the structure does provide, could really help that effort.
So this year, astronomers found something very unusual. They found two clouds of gas 12 billion light years away that are made almost entirely of hydrogen. They have no elements in them that are heavier, which is very surprising because 2 billion years after the Big Bang, which is the era when these two gas clouds existed, the universe was supposed to have been a very violent place, and all of the gases in the universe were supposed to have been mixed up amongst themselves so that no pockets of the universe were supposed to be left uncontaminated by heavier elements made in the hearts of stars. The other find along the same lines was the discovery of a star that, again, seems to be made entirely of hydrogen and helium and has no elements heavier than those. Together, these finds suggest that the chemical evolution of the universe had more twists and turns than astronomers had thought.
The microbiome is the community of organisms that live in and on our bodies. And over the last few years, we've really come to appreciate how diverse those communities are. So we decided that microbiome research deserved runner-up status because there were several key papers that came out in 2011. One has to do with discerning a pattern in the complexity of the gut bacteria. We now think we can divide these communities into three categories. These categories correlate with long-term diet and are named according to the dominant bacteria in them. We also advanced our understanding of the role of the microbiome in cancer, in immune system function, and in metabolic diseases. And together, all this work really enhanced our appreciation of just how important these microbial communities are to our health and well-being.
So 2011 saw the publication of the first partial results of a phase 3 clinical trial of a malaria vaccine. This was a huge study involving more than 15,000 young children in 7 countries in Africa, all the way from Ghana to Mozambique. Now, malaria vaccine development has been an incredibly frustrating, difficult field with lots of disappointments. And this was the first phase 3 study with some real degree of success. About half of the children aged between 5 and 17 months were protected from severe malaria, which can be fatal if you get it. That's still not a terrific result. Most vaccines perform much better than that. And there are other questions about this vaccine as well. We don't know how long the protection will last, if it wanes after 1 or 2 years. We also don't know how much this vaccine will cost, whether it will be affordable for the countries that really need it, or who will pay the bills. But still, given the long and frustrating history, it's a start. And researchers can build on this vaccine to design maybe others that do better. So despite all the shortcomings, we think this is a runner-up for Breakthrough of the Year.
So for the past 15 years, astronomers have been discovering all sorts of exoplanets, or planets outside the solar system. These are strange beasts. Some are as dense as lead, some as light as styrofoam. And this year they've continued to discover several weird exoplanets as well as weird exoplanetary systems. In February, they discovered a system with 6 planets, 5 of which are closer to their parent star than Mercury is to the Sun. That is very surprising because you don't expect so many planets to be bunched up together so close to the parent star. On the other extreme, astronomers discovered a cluster of free-floating planets that appeared to have come unhinged from their parent star. In fact, there was no parent star in sight. And so these discoveries are showing that planetary systems have a chaotic history, a violent history that researchers are only now beginning to understand.
So zeolites are a family of porous minerals that we've known about for over 250 years, and they're extremely useful in modern society. We use them as catalysts for breaking apart things like the long hydrocarbon chains in oil into the shorter ones that are in gasoline that are more volatile. They are used as filters for purifying air, purifying water. Now, the problem with zeolites is that in the past, they've tended to have extremely small pores, and that's limited their usefulness. What happened this year was that researchers in Korea and then another group in France and Germany came up with different ways to make zeolites with not only the small pore sizes, but also larger ones, which could make them as useful catalysts and filters for a wider variety of compounds. Researchers in Minnesota also reported a new way to make ultra-thin zeolite membranes, which could be very useful as cheaper, more effective filters and catalysts as well. So I think what 2011 taught us is that zeolite research still has a lot of potential ahead.
Scientists studying cells in the laboratory have known for a long time that those cells will slowly stop dividing and enter a period of old age, or what they call senescence. They've also learned more recently that senescent cells build up in certain tissues and may contribute to age-related symptoms such as cataracts, the wrinkling of skin, even the muscle weakness that comes to many elderly. But they haven't been able to prove that the senescent cells cause those symptoms. This year at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, a team actually showed that for the first time. They genetically engineered mice so that if given a drug, their senescent cells would be eliminated. Those mice didn't live longer, but they did have a healthier life. They warded off some of those age-related symptoms. If the drug was given to middle-aged mice, they also benefited. Not clear that we can target senescent cells in people, but if we can figure out a way, we might be able to live healthier, if not longer.